Subjective units of distress. When should hypnotists use them? What the heck are they? Well, guess what? They're magical ways. It's a magical way of knowing how bad a problem is and then knowing when you've changed it. So we've got our wizard, Mike Mandel.
Hello, boys and girls.
From the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy to answer the question. Let me just frame it then. So Rachel, one of our members, had asked, when you use subjective units of distress, we teach that specifically with a protocol called ADAC, ADAC. We'll make sure there's a YouTube card that can pop up here so you can learn about that if you want. What are SUDs, and do you only use them with ADAC, or do you use them with ego state work and other stuff too, Mike?
Great question. Subjective units of distress are typically out of 10, and it's a digitized way to express how severe a problem is at any given moment. So you could say, how bad is that emotional pain when you think of it right now? And the person might go, it's an 8 out of 10. Okay, so now we're going to write down 8 and show the person that we're reducing it through the protocol.
Like right now, I'm looking at your coffee, and I'm thinking, I want a coffee. How bad? 7 out of 10. I want a coffee right now.
I can understand that's pretty good coffee as well. But anytime you can think of applying SUDs and determining what the problem is, whether it's physiological or psychological, whatever, you can apply it to anything. And kids are great with this too. You don't have to say, what is it out of 10?
You say, how big is it?
How big is that hurt? And this big. And then you work on them. You say, how big is it now? Oh, just a little teeny.
Yeah.
Keep at it until it's 0 is our main thing. Now, the interesting thing about this is she's asking about ego state work. And the ego state, the subpersonalities, we all have about 100 to 150 that get us through our daily life. And each one is different. It's a sub-personality, but each one is us. And at any given time, one of them will be executive, meaning it is connected.
Kind of running the show.
Prefrontal cortex, it's running the show. The key is, if you feel pain or discomfort or subjective units of distress at all, it's an ego state telling you that. So you're always working with an ego state. It is invariably an ego state. So
that's a really good point.
It has to be an ego state.
You always say everything is an ego state problem, which doesn't mean that you have to do ego state work on it. It just means that the problem is being experienced by one of your ego, one or more of your ego states. Yeah, it could be a conflict between ego states, could be a evaded ego state, could be a dissonant ego state.
Any of the above.
Any of these things.
A healthy ego state.
Right, it could be a healthy ego state. A healthy ego state makes me want to go exercise, let's say, right? So yeah, you always have an issue, whatever the issue is. Not you always have an issue, but whenever one has an issue, and you can scale it 0 to 10, you could say to a person, well, what do you call that part of you that feels that issue? And they would probably be able to come up with a name. So that's our evidence that it's, in this model, it's an ego state having the issue. So you're always using SUDs on an ego state, even if you don't call it out as an ego state.
And my note here is SUDs will only give you the level of the ego state that is currently executive.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There might be others. And it gets very complex, because if you help someone get rid of physical pain, reduce physical pain, what Freddie Jackman calls old, useless, unnecessary pain, it's a signal. When you get rid of it, the interesting thing is, if you check with ego states, not every time, but you can work with idiomotor signals, whatever, you'll discover sometimes one extremely durable, tough ego state is carrying the pain itself now and is still carrying it.
Interesting.
And that can be exhausting.
I was thinking also, when you said depending on the ego state that's executive, let's say somebody is a smoker and wants to quit smoking, but if they're in there, let's say they're also a marathon runner. I know that doesn't really sound like, but if they're in the middle of training for a marathon and you say, how bad do you want a cigarette right now? The SUDs of desire is probably not particularly high if the ego state that's executive is not the one that identifies as a smoker. It's like I'm running a marathon or something like that. Whereas later, on a work break, when they're taking their 20 minutes at lunch or something, they probably have that craving creep up.
Really, and you brought up an excellent point here, Chris, because I've said many times, if someone is a smoker, we've seen this as therapists in the past, the person makes the appointment by phone and they're desperate. I've got to quit. My uncle's got cancer, lung cancer, and my dad had it. I've got to quit. Well, and you're determining the SUDs are like 10 out of 10.
Because they're in the right ego state at that moment. They show up in the office
and a different ego state comes in. You say, so you want to quit? And you'll see something like, I think I do.
I think I should.
Yeah. Very common.
Yeah, so that's right. Which is why Mike always teaches people to get their clients, people being the hypnotists, get your clients to show up craving that cigarette, right? Not having smoked the day of the appointment. So that they're
about 2 p.m.
Yeah, they're kind of climbing the walls. They really. It's like some people. One person said to me, "Well, that's really mean." I'm like, well, do you want to freaking quit or not, right? Like, you do it properly or you don't. You know, yeah, anyway.
Interesting, though.
Different discussion.
It's always ego stage.
Okay, so you're generally going to use SUDs to frame how big a problem is on a scale of 0 to 10. You're going to then check in after you've done work to see where it is, and you're always striving to get to 0.
Always aim for 0.
Right.
Put them in a powerful state afterwards with direct suggestion, and realize you should always test your work. Always. People are afraid to test their work. Why? They're afraid it hasn't worked. Well, wouldn't you rather find out while they're still in your office than get an angry call from them the following week?
Yeah, makes sense.
So you check it. You can just future pace when you're in that situation tomorrow. What will happen? Well, I'll be great. And you're calibrating their fine. Or you can set up idiomotor yes-no signals, work with Chevreul's pendulum, whatever.
Right.
And determine they are fixed.
Love it. Okay, I think that handles it very well. So whenever you're working with someone, think about using SUDs. Think about using that as evidence that they've seen a change happen, because when they feel that it was an 8 out of 10, oh, now it's only a 1, or get it to a 0. But even if you only get it to a 1 or a 2, you can frame that question, even though we're shooting for a 0. If we could only get this down to a 1 or a 2, would that be a good outcome for you? And they go, yeah. And then when you get them there, they're really happy, right? So you'll learn how to do this inside of the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. And check it out, MikeMandelHypnosis.com. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, and good night.